Welcome to Heritage Acres Homestead. I'm Chas. Here you'll find our family as we strive to live a life that pleases the Lord. We do our best to make the most out of what we've been given, so we'd like to invite you to come along and join us on our journey.
Hey y'all, welcome back to Heritage Acres Homestead. I'm Chas and I'm thankful you're here today. As you can probably tell, I've got a bit of a hoarse voice, so I'm going to try to, even though it doesn't really hurt for me to talk, it sounds terrible and it does dry my throat out a little bit more, so it's going to be fairly brief. I say that, but then I talk a lot. So who knows, we'll see. But today we're making pasta sauce. And when I just say pasta sauce, but that covers a wide variety for us as a family. We use this sauce when we're making spaghetti, chicken parmesan, when we're having pizza, when we need a dip for breadsticks. It goes every which way. And it's just, a multi-purpose sauce. But it has Italian seasonings, so it's it can work in a wide variety. My husband said to me yesterday, he said, "Chas, I noticed something that you need to do in your videos, and of course I want to know, what can I do to make it better?" And he said, "Watch how many times you say which I already knew. I hate it. I've got to be more diligent to stop myself. It's just one of those fillers, you know what I mean? So I'm going to really try to be more careful and speak and not just pause. If I need to pause, I'll pause. Hopefully without going, ugh." Another thing is so. I use that like at the beginning of every sentence, I think. You just get in the habit, I think that's just part of it. What we're going to do, see, I almost started with so. What we're going to do is we're going to cut up our tomatoes. And this is very much like I make my salsa. If you've ever watched my salsa video, it's very similar. And what I do is this knife is terrible. I should not have to be sawing these tomatoes. What you want to do is you want about 80% tomatoes and 20% stuff. So see, I did. I did too. We're going to do 80% tomatoes, and I do a wide variety of tomatoes. I do tomato tomatoes. I do some of my sun gold tomatoes. I do canning tomatoes. I do Romas. I do a variety. It'd be great if I had all Romas for sauce, but I don't. So I use what I've got, and it works. And so what we're going to do is we're going to just use this wide variety. Plus, I think it gives it great flavor when you do that. So this wide variety of tomatoes, and I'm going to switch knives here in about a second. And then we're going to cut up our 20% of other. And when I say other, that means garlic, onions, bell peppers if you want it. Those are my others. So then you add your other. For me, my other is bell peppers, onions, garlic, and then I have seasonings. But I add those toward the end of the cooking, because if I don't have them fresh, then I add them dried at the end to taste. So what I'll do right now is I'll cut up, and I like to use just a baking sheet, and I'll cut up. Like I said, there's no measuring here. It's just eyeballing it, tasting it at the end to see what you need. I've even put in, occasionally, I'll add some tomato sauce or tomato paste if it needs a little bit more richness, because sometimes this is driving me crazy. I hold it down because it's wobbling. So when you're making your sauce and you get it all roasted, and I roast my sauce. I roast all my vegetables first, then I puree them, and then I cook them and get them all seasoned the way I want. So we're going to get these in. I've already got one pan in the oven. I'm going to get this other pan in the oven. But what you want to recognize is every year's tomatoes are different. This year we had a lot of rain early on, very little rain since. So a lot of people's tomatoes are dry. They're not as full of flavor as they normally are. And that's something that you have to deal with. And that way, when you go to taste it, if it's lacking, you can figure that out. You can add, like I even said, I've added some canned tomato paste before to give it a bit of a richness if it's lacking that. And that's what's beautiful about making your own. You can get it to where you love what your product is. I'll tell you, last year's sauce was some of the best sauce, and I'm making it exactly like I did today. But every time we would open up a jar and put it on whatever we were making, the family said, "Mom, this is so good." And every single time it was because I had my sauce. Now, I didn't make enough sauce last year. I thought I did, but we didn't make it. We use a lot of like pasta sauce or marinara or whatever you want to call it. We use a lot of it because some Italian dishes are my family's favorite. Not mine, but most of the family, that's their favorite. So I like Mexican. And so anyways, I made a lot, but I didn't make enough. So I did buy some. And even when I buy some, I try to add like some canned tomatoes that I put up, or extra tomato sauce, and then season it up the way we would normally eat it. But every single time I did that, even though I added things of my own to it, I did not get the rave reviews that I got from homemade sauce. That I don't know if that's just my family, but it was great sauce last year. And hopefully I can recreate that and make it as exciting this year as it was then. So, like I said, we're gonna chop these tomatoes, and I'm gonna try my best. That one had a little rough spot on the top. You may ask also, what about the skins? So when you roast your vegetables in the oven, I don't have an issue with this. If you have an issue with skins, skin them. Take the skins off. But my thoughts are once you roast them and you puree them up, whether you're putting them through a blender or whether you're just using like an immersion blender into the pot, they're minuscule. They're not very noticeable to me. But I'll tell you again, I may not have as refined of a palate as everybody else. So to each their own. This is easy, this is delicious, and it works for us to do it this way. So you can do it however way you like. If you don't want the skins, by all means, you go ahead and skin them. But for my bunch, we don't mind. I'm going to keep on cutting these little tomatoes and my bigger tomatoes, and then adding my peppers. I've had these in the fridge for a little bit, so they've got some spots on them. I'm going to have to cut around. But it smells delicious in here already. Should use that one sooner. I'm not worrying about cutting all these up perfectly, like in dices. I'm just rough chopping everything, because once I get it roasted off, then it'll go into the blender, and it's going to be pureed to, fairly smooth. And that way it saves me some time on this part. So when I cut my tomato, just so you can see here, I'm going around it, and I'm cutting off like the cheeks of it. Let me see if I can move this. And then I cut the core out. Put the core in my compost. And then on each cheek, I may slice it a couple of times and then rough chop. I told you I was going to get another knife. I ain't done it yet. And then that, with the juice and everything, goes straight onto my pan. Because what happens when you roast your vegetables is they take on a depth of flavor that you cannot get if you just put them in a pot. Now, you can condense food when you put it in a pot. It will condense, and it will, you'll start to get some flavor out of it, but it is nothing like when you roast your vegetables. Roasting vegetables makes them, like, they bring out this caramelization, and it's almost a sweetness that comes out of the onions and the tomatoes and everything, because of those juices that are in there. They get browned. The natural sugars just yummy. It's so good. And it's, for years, y'all, for years and years and years, I made sauce, and it was subpar. I mean, we ate it every year. We ate my salsa every year. But it was not like what I make now that my family just gobbles up and loves. And it's all because I changed to roasting my vegetables rather than just cooking them down. Now, this is another step. This does make it take longer, because you're doing a whole nother roasting, and it roasts for like almost an hour, 40 minutes to an hour, depending on your oven. Mine, like I told you before, mine cooks low. You don't want them to burn, so don't let it burn, but you do want it roasted, so you want some brown bits in there. Those brown bits are usually the good part. But you don't want burnt bits. So there's a fine line. So when you're roasting, like, you may put it in and you go, oh my gosh, there's way too much juice here. It's going to make it a sloppy sauce. But that juice condenses, it sweetens, it gets flavor, and then once you add it together and puree it up in your pot, you'll see that it is not a very juicy sauce. It is a rich, thick sauce, and that's what you want. Nobody wants watery spaghetti sauce. If you do, then y'all come over here and let me feed you. Show you what sauce should be like. I can't imagine watery sauce tasting good. But I'm going to get this chopped up. Get these pans. Just kind of, I'll have me if I use up my pans, I'll just chop into a bowl. And then that bowl will pour out into the pan once the others come out. And when the others come out, they'll go into the pot. And we'll just keep on trucking. Because I want them to cool down before I blend it all together. I want them to cool just a little bit because we're going to go into my blender. And then, like I said, we'll season them up. So again, I'm adding tomatoes, all varieties now. Paste tomatoes, tomatoes, big old slicers, canning tomatoes, all of them work. Put them on here. Don't forget to juice, break that juice in there. Onions, garlic, bell peppers, whatever you like. If you start wanting to put like zucchini and eggplant and stuff like that in there, you can, but you probably are going to need to pressure your sauce rather than just water bath it or steam can it, because that's going to get you into a whole nother thing. What I do is I keep mine pretty basic and just use these things right here, and water bath or steam can mine. Let's get it moving. All right. So one of the beautiful things about doing it this way is because you may not like chunks of bell pepper in your spaghetti sauce, but by roasting the bell pepper, by roasting those onions, that garlic, it all melds together, and then when you puree it up, you get the flavors without necessarily having the texture that you may or may not like. Now, by all means, if you want a chunky sauce, you go for it and you add some chunks in there. But for me and our family and our spaghetti sauce, pasta sauce, we do like it a little smoother. So that's what we do. But, you know, like I said, by adding all these extra vegetables, the onions, the garlic, the bell peppers, that gives it such a great flavor, more nutrition, and it makes the taste just exemplary. So once we get that out, like I said, we're going to use some more seasonings, and then we'll mix it all up and taste accordingly and see what we need and what we don't. So my first pan is ready. I'm going to go ahead and pull it out. Ooh, it's hot. See if you can see it. So right around the edges, I just don't have any other hands and nobody else is here. But right around the edges, you can see just little bits of browning on the vegetables. So that's what I want. You can tell that the pan is not burnt. There's a little bit of, let's see if I can scoop this and show it to you. See that caramelization? That's what I'm looking for. That's your flavor. So I'm just gonna scooch everything into this pot. That's a large pot. Let that sit there and cool for just a minute. And then I will fill the pan up with more and get it back in the oven and get it going again. But I will, let me show you this. Show you how big this pot is. So I barely got anything in the pot. But once I do get more in there, I'll use my immersion blender and get it blended up. And once I get about halfway full of a pot, then I'll probably start seasoning it and then start jarring it up. I turned off all the fans, so hopefully you could hear me a little better since my voice is so weak. But the sauce is completely done now. It's all been roasted. I put it all into a pan. I tried to puree it with my stick blender. It did not do the job I wanted. I think it's done on me. It's really old. So I did run it through a power blender, Ninja blender, and it worked super good. It's very smooth now. But then I needed to taste and check my seasonings, and I added all my seasonings, and that'll be in the description. But it needed a little bit more salt and a little bit more savory, so I added some more Worcestershire and some more salt at the end, and now I think it's just right. So to each quart jar, we're going to add 2 teaspoons of lemon juice, and that's just going to help to make sure the acidity is right. Then we're going to fill our jars. And you want to fill them just up to the neck because you want to leave that head space. Then you're going to add you're going to wipe them down, add a new seal and a ring, and then we're going to process these in either a hot water bath canner or a steam canner for 40 minutes. Now, this is something that those of you who have wondered about steam canners may not know. If you are canning something that says to be water bath for an hour, you don't want to use a steam canner. Steam canners are for 45 minutes and less. So our tomato marinara sauce, it's perfect for the steam canning because it's just 40. So we're going to fill up our jars and get them all in the canner. There we go. As with any of your canned goods, if you can let them stay in a spot for about 12 to 24 hours. You're going to make sure that you get a good seal. Then you're going to take your rings off, ensure that the seal is good, wipe it down, and put it on your pantry for storage. People ask me all the time, how long do canned goods last? And what I say is, if you have processed them properly, if you have made sure the seal is good, then I say that they last for years. Books may tell you differently, and that's fine. If you don't want to use them past a year or whatever, that's totally up to you. But I used some tomatoes, I guess it was last week, from 2020, and they were in perfect shape. I opened the lid, they smelled good, they looked good, they had no issues whatsoever, and they tasted good too. So again, everybody's got to do what their own conscience tells them when it comes to things like this. But as long as it's been a good seal and it's properly processed, I don't think there's any reason to fear letting your canned goods be on the shelf for a couple of years or more if they need be. But most of the time, what you're ideally wanting to do is use them up within a couple of years, 3 years or so, and then replace them, because you're going to put up more, and you just rotate them out. But sometimes, one can get stuck behind something or whatever, and that's where you use more discretion if you need to. But I hope this is helpful. I hope that you make up some wonderful sauce for your family. And if you use the recipe, please let me know how you like it. Have a great day, y'all. Bye-bye.